Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep into one of the most, well, astonishing digital robberies in history. Imagine a theft so massive, so audacious that it makes traditional bank heists look like, I don't know, petty shoplifting. We're talking about a staggering $1.5 billion in cryptocurrency. Vanished, just like that. But this wasn't just a simple crime. It was something far more profound. It was effectively an act of cyber warfare, a highly sophisticated maneuver for sanctions evasion, and, maybe most chillingly, a direct pipeline funding North Korea's nuclear weapons programs. It's a truly wild story, and our mission today on the deep dive is to break down this incredibly complex operation into simple, understandable terms. We promise no technical jargon overwhelming you, just clarity, compelling insights, and a journey into the hidden corners of our digital world.
It really does shift our understanding of conflict itself, doesn't it? I mean, when we talk about cyber warfare here, we're not discussing some lone hacker in a basement trying to make a quick buck. Not at all. This is about digital attacks designed specifically to achieve strategic national objectives.
Oh, I know.
It's about nation-state leveraging technology, not just for financial gain, although that's part of it, but to bypass traditional economic blockades like international sanctions, and crucially, to directly fund its most sensitive and, frankly, dangerous programs. We're talking nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles. So yeah, this isn't merely about theft. It's about geopolitical power, state survival, and a completely new kind of battleground playing out online.
Absolutely. And that's our commitment here on the deep dive, to take something as dense and, let's face it, complicated as state-sponsored crypto hacking and make it not just accessible, but genuinely compelling. We want to unpack how this incredible event happened, why it matters to everyone, even if you've never touched a cryptocurrency in your life, and that's key, and what crucial lessons we can all learn from it. It's a story that really reveals just how intertwined our digital lives are with global events, with national security. So grab your virtual seatbelts, because this deep dive is going to be quite a ride. Okay, so our story begins on what seemed like a totally ordinary day, February 4th, 2025. Picture this. A developer working at a major crypto security company called SafeWallet is just, at his computer. Now, just pause and think about the sheer irony here for a second. Someone whose entire job revolves around making digital assets secure. He becomes the unwitting entry point for an attack of, well, unprecedented scale. He downloads what he thinks is a harmless project for his Mac. It's labeled MC-based Stock Invest Simulator. Sounds innocent enough, right? Maybe a useful tool for personal finance, or perhaps a coding challenge, something to sharpen his skills. I mean, who among us hasn't downloaded something that looked perfectly legitimate from the internet?
Yeah, and this is precisely where the deception truly starts to unravel. It's a classic example of what we call a supply chain attack. That file, the MC-based Stock Invest Simulator, it was anything but harmless. It was, as our sources describe it, a poisoned gift. A malicious file, a trap, essentially carefully crafted to look entirely legitimate. Imagine receiving a beautifully wrapped package, But inside, instead of a gift, it contains this tiny, invisible remote control. The moment the developer clicked to open that file, he wasn't just running a simulation. He was, without realizing it, basically handing over the digital keys to his computer, to the attackers. It's a profoundly insidious form of intrusion because it plays on human trust, on our familiar digital habits.
So it wasn't some brute force attack then, not like they hammered down the firewalls of SafeWallet or Bybit right from the start. No, it was more subtle, like a social engineering play, targeting just one person. What does that tell us, really, about the vulnerability of even the most fortified digital defenses?
It tells us something crucial, that often the weakest link in even the most robust digital defense, it's the human element. That, combined with the incredibly intricate web of software we all rely on. See, attackers know that direct assault on heavily defended systems are incredibly difficult. They're costly, time-consuming. It's far more efficient, often, to find a seemingly minor crack or to exploit a moment of human trust, just like this. Once that poison gift was open, the hackers had their digital foot in the door. That was it. They immediately gained direct, unauthorized access to that developer's machine. They turned his own workstation, a place that's supposed to be secure, into their launchpad for the next, much more sophisticated phases of their operation. So this initial breach, while it seemed simple in its execution, it was monumental in its consequences. It gave them the foothold they needed.
Right, that crucial first step. So with that initial foothold established on the developer's computer, they didn't waste any time, I imagine. They weren't just interested in his machine, were they? They saw him as a way in, a stepping stone, a piece of the puzzle to get deeper, more systemic access into SafeWallet's whole infrastructure. So what was their next move?
Their next move was, well, smart from their perspective. They exploited this initial access to steal what we call access credentials. Now, think of these like the master keys and combinations, the unique digital fingerprints, the passwords that allow someone to log into and control really powerful centralized systems, and the system they targeted, AWS.
AWS. Okay, now for listeners who might not be, tech experts, what exactly is AWS? Why is stealing its credentials such a critical step in a hack like this? Is it sort of like breaking into their main server room, but digitally?
That's actually a pretty good analogy, yeah. AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. In very simple terms, imagine you're building a massive, intricate digital city, right? Now, instead of every company having to buy the land, build their own power plants, roads, water systems, which is incredibly expensive, incredibly complex, AWS offers all of that as a service. It's this gigantic remote computing and storage infrastructure that tons of companies use, from small startups right up to global enterprises like SafeWallet. They use it to host their apps, store their data, run their operations. It's essentially a rented, highly sophisticated digital backbone for their business. So when the attackers stole the access credentials to SafeWallet's AWS accounts, yeah, it was like they got their hands on the master keys and the blueprints to a huge chunk of SafeWallet's entire digital city. It gave them the ability to move around, access data, even modify systems within SafeWallet's cloud environment, basically acting like they were legitimate, highly privileged employees.
Wow. Okay, so they had the keys to the kingdom, or at least a very significant part of it. This wasn't just about accessing files anymore. It was about getting deep into the fundamental infrastructure. Yeah. What did they do next with that escalated access? They must move quickly.
They did. With those credentials, they were able to quietly infiltrate SafeWallet systems even further, but in a much more insidious way. This is where the truly stealthy part began. They started injecting malicious code into JavaScript files. Now, malicious code, that just means tiny, hidden, harmful instructions. Think of it like a secret bad ingredient mixed into a trusted recipe book designed to subtly change the outcome without anyone noticing.
Okay, like a tiny change in the instructions that messes everything up later.
Exactly. And JavaScript files, these are like the building blocks, the scripts that make websites and applications work dynamically, make them interactive. These aren't just for making pretty websites look good. In the world of crypto, these are the very instructions that your web browser or your wallet interface uses to actually display your transactions, to sign them digitally, and to interact with the underlying blockchain technology. So the hackers snuck these bad instructions into what looked like perfectly normal operating scripts. They effectively replaced a page in a trusted instruction manual with a deceptive one.
And crucially, these corrupted JavaScript files, they were then loaded directly into Bybit Exchange's cold wallets. Now, this is a critical detail, right? Because we always hear about cold wallets. They're supposed to be the Fort Knox of crypto. Ultra secure. Can you explain what cold wallets are and why this particular infiltration method was so alarming? Because the common thinking is if it's cold, it's completely safe, isn't it?
That's an excellent point, and it really hits at a fundamental question about security assumptions. Cold wallets are indeed designed to be ultra-secure crypto vaults. That's their purpose. They represent cryptocurrency storage that is kept offline, meaning it's disconnected from the internet for the vast majority of the time. This makes them highly resistant to external online hacking attempts, because logically, if something isn't connected, you can't attack it directly over the network. Often, a cold wallet is a physical device, like a specialized USB stick, or sometimes even just a piece of paper with the cryptographic keys printed on it, stored securely, like in a physical safe. The whole point of cold wallets is to be the safest place for large sums of cryptocurrency, insulated from those network-based threats. However, and this is the key part, what happened here is that the malicious code wasn't trying to break into the cold wallet from the outside while it was offline. No. Instead, it corrupted the very logic, the instructions that governed how those cold wallets would interact with transactions when they were brought online, or rather, when their associated software was used to prepare and sign those transactions. The source material puts it perfectly. But when the code itself is corrupted, even a vault can be compromised. It's like having a perfectly impenetrable bank vault, right? But the instructions inside for how the vault door operates or how it interprets commands from the bank manager are themselves faulty or have been secretly altered. The hackers didn't need to pick the lock from the outside. They subtly changed the blueprint, the operating manual, before the vault was even really in active use for this transaction, so that when it was asked to perform a legitimate function, it would quietly, secretly, do something entirely different. It's a deeply disturbing level of compromise because it completely undermines the very foundation of trust within the entire system.
That's crew. Yeah, that's a truly chilling thought. Not brute forcing the lock, but subtly changing the operating manual beforehand. And this leads us directly to the grand deception itself, doesn't it? The moment all these meticulous, sneaky steps culminated in that massive theft. So, okay, we've got the hackers deep inside the system. They've tampered with the code governing Bybit's super secure cold wallets. This all built up to a pivotal moment on February 21st, 2025. On that day, Bybit employees were conducting what they thought was just a routine transaction. Normal day at the office. Imagine them at their screens, approving what looked like a standard crypto transfer. The source notes, and this is critical, on the screen, everything looked normal, the right address, the right amount. They saw exactly what they expected to see. No red flags, no warnings, nothing seemed out of the ordinary at all. They were just doing their jobs, following the established procedures.
And this is where the sheer sophistication of the attack truly shines. It's a masterclass in digital camouflage, really. The illusion of normalcy was absolute. The employees had no visual cue, no blinking red light, no indication whatsoever that anything was wrong. This just highlights the profound level of digital trickery involved here. Because under the surface, as the source puts it, the hackers had quietly altered the logic. This wasn't some visible disruption that would trigger an alarm system. No, it was a silent, insidious manipulation operating in the background completely out of sight. It's what makes this particular type of heist so difficult to defend against and why it's such a critical lesson for anyone handling digital assets.
And the core of this manipulation, the actual trick they pulled off to make the money move, was something called the delegate call exploit. Okay, this sounds incredibly technical, like something maybe only a blockchain developer would truly get, but it's crucial to understanding how $1.5 billion just vanished. Can you break down what the delegate call exploit is? Simplify it for us? How did this hidden instruction make the system basically hand over the money willingly?
Absolutely. Let's try. Think of the delegate call exploit as, like a hidden instruction or maybe a magician's trick being performed right under your nose, but you don't see the sleight of hand. In the world of blockchain and smart contracts, which are essentially self-executing computer programs where the rules of an agreement are written directly into the code, a delegate call is actually a legitimate function. It has valid uses. It's like one smart contract saying, hey, I need to perform a specific function, but instead of running the code myself, I'm going to ask another smart contract to run its code for me. Crucially, I want it to do so using my identity, my money, and my permissions. Normally, this is used for perfectly good reasons, like maybe upgrading a contract without deploying a whole new one, or sharing common functions between contracts efficiently. It allows one contract to delegate a function call to another contract. When it does this, it executes the code of the second contract, but, and this is the key, it does so in the context of the first contract. This means it uses the storage, the balance, the permissions, everything of the first contract, the one that made the call. Now, where the exploit comes in is when this delegate call function is abused by an attacker. Imagine you've given your trusted assistant a very specific script to follow. Send this package to address A. Clear instructions. But I, as the hacker, have secretly managed to replace one line in that script with a hidden redirect instruction using a malicious delegate call. Your assistant still follows your script perfectly. They see your original address, address A, clearly on the package label. They believe they're fulfilling your command precisely. But because of that one cleverly swapped, effectively invisible instruction buried in the code they're executing, the package secretly gets rerouted to my address, address B. So the system, in effect, performed two actions simultaneously. It showed the legitimate transaction to the employees on the screen, but under the hood, it also executed a hidden instruction that rerouted the funds, actually sent to B. So the Bybit employees thought they were approving a transaction to a legitimate, intended recipient. The system displayed that legitimate recipient. Everything looked fine. But the delegate call exploit, operating silently in the background, thanks to that malicious JavaScript they'd injected earlier, it rerouted the actual funds to the hacker's own accounts instead. The system was essentially tricked, or made, to hand over the money willingly, without appearing to be broken into or forcibly overridden. Didn't look like a forced entry at all. It looked like a normal consented transfer, but with a crucial hidden modification to the destination address. This is why the source material so aptly puts it. They didn't break in. They made the system hand over the money willingly. It's just a profound level of digital trickery, making the very mechanism designed for secure transactions betray its own purpose.
That's stinging. That's absolutely staggering. It's not a smash and grab. It's a meticulously planned con job where the system itself is the unwitting accomplice. Wow. They didn't have to bypass security. They leveraged the security mechanisms themselves to do their bidding. Incredible. So, okay, they've successfully executed this highly sophisticated digital heist. Now they've got $1.5 billion in cryptocurrency sitting in their digital wallets. You'd think that would be the hardest part, right?
Mm.
Hiding such a colossal sum of money, especially in the relatively transparent world of blockchain where transactions are recorded, that must be an almost insurmountable challenge for anyone.
You would absolutely think so. And for most criminal enterprises, yeah, it probably would be an insurmountable challenge. But this wasn't just any criminal enterprise, remember. This was, according to intelligence sources, a state-sponsored operation, likely North Korea. That means immense resources, a clear mandate, and a level of sophistication, planning, and patience rarely seen. So yes, the challenge of concealing such a colossal sum, especially on public blockchains where every transaction is theoretically recorded and traceable, requires truly advanced and rapid techniques. And they had them.
And they moved with incredible speed, didn't they? The sources mention a staggering pace of money laundering right after the theft. It wasn't like they took their time. It was a digital blur, it sounds like.
Absolutely. The speed was astounding. Our sources note that in just 48 hours, $160 million was laundered. Just think about that for a moment. $160 million obscured, moved, mixed in just 2 days. This wasn't some leisurely process. It was a rapid, high-volume operation designed specifically to quickly disseminate the assets and make them effectively untraceable before authorities could even really react or freeze things. And to make tracking even harder, the stolen funds were split across 50-plus wallets. This massive dispersion immediately complicates any attempt to follow the money. Investigators are left chasing dozens, maybe hundreds, of separate trails simultaneously, trying to piece together this digital jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are missing or disguised. It's like throwing a handful of glitter into a hurricane and then trying to find and collect every single speck afterwards.
Okay, so how do you even begin to launder money in the crypto world on that kind of scale? What are the tools?
Yep.
The sources mention a few key techniques. Let's break down Tornado Cash first. It's described as a mixer or blender. What does that mean in practice? How does it achieve that anonymity?
Right, Tornado Cash is, well, exactly that, a mixer or blender for cryptocurrency. And it's a very powerful tool for obscuring the money trail. Imagine you have a large, opaque communal swimming pool. Everyone who wants to mix their money comes and pours their distinctively colored liquid into this pool. Maybe yours is blue, mine is red, someone else's is green. Once it's all mixed together, it becomes this murky, indistinguishable color. It's impossible to tell whose original liquid contributed to which part of the final mix. Tornado Cash operates on a similar principle, but with crypto. Users deposit their cryptocurrency into a common smart contract pool. Then, after some time, or once enough funds from various sources are commingled in that pool, they can withdraw an equivalent amount. But the crucial part is, the crypto they withdraw is drawn from the commingled funds, not directly linked to their original deposit. This effectively breaks the on-chain link between the origin address where the stolen money came from and the destination address where it goes after mixing. It hides the association by combining legitimate and illicit funds, making it incredibly difficult for investigators to definitively link the withdrawn funds back to their original illicit source. On the blockchain, where every transaction is usually transparent and traceable, Tornado Cash acts as a potent privacy-enhancing tool, which unfortunately makes it a favorite for laundering illicit funds.
That sounds incredibly effective for hiding things. And then, okay, once they had mixed the funds using something like Tornado Cash, the sources say they jumped blockchains using cross-chain bridges. Okay, help us understand what blockchains are in this context first. Are they like different digital currencies? And then what do these bridges actually do to make tracing even harder?
That's a great way to think about it, actually. For a non-technical listener, yeah, think of different blockchains as distinct digital railway lines, or maybe financial networks. Bitcoin runs on its own railway line, right? With its own unique trains and tracks and rules. Ethereum runs on another completely separate line. Solana on yet another, and so on. Each has its own specific rules, its own technology, its own community, its own way of operating. And normally, money or assets on one railway line can't just magically jump directly onto another. They are inherently separate systems. They don't naturally talk to each other. And that's where these cross-chain bridges come into play. They act like specialized tunnels or connectors between these different railway lines. Instead of a physical tunnel, though, it's usually a set of smart contracts and protocols designed to facilitate the transfer of value across chains. Typically, when you want to move funds across a bridge, you deposit your token, say Ethereum, on the original chain, the Ethereum railway line. The bridge protocol then locks those funds on the Ethereum side. Then it mints or releases an equivalent amount of a corresponding token on the destination chain, maybe like a wrapped Ethereum token on the Solana network. The original tokens aren't truly moved in a physical sense. They're just locked on one side, while new, representative ones are created or unlocked on the other. This makes it significantly harder for investigators to trace the journey of the funds. Why? Because you're no longer just following a single clear path within one network. You're trying to track funds as they transition across diverse, often incompatible systems, sometimes multiple times. It adds multiple layers of complexity, multiple points where the trail can get obscured or confused.
Right. Okay, so they're not just mixing the money within one system, they're also hopping it across completely different digital networks to further muddy the waters. Very clever in a criminal sense. And finally, the sources say they converted funds to Bitcoin maybe because it's widely accepted, and then dispersed them again using non-KYC platforms. What exactly does non-KYC mean, and why is using those platforms particularly useful for illicit activities like money laundering?
This raises a really important point about the regulatory landscape in the financial world, both traditional and crypto. KYC stands for Know Your Customer. Most legitimate financial institutions, banks, brokerage firms, and increasingly, major cryptocurrency exchanges operate under strict KYC regulations. These regulations legally require them to verify the identity of their users. This usually means you, as a customer, have to provide personal information. Your name, address, date of birth, often submitting a government-issued ID like a driver's license or passport. This verification has to happen before you can open an account or conduct significant transactions. It's a crucial measure designed specifically to prevent money laundering, terrorist financing, and other illicit financial activities because it creates a paper trail and holds individuals accountable for their financial actions. So logically, non-KYC platforms are exchanges or other crypto services that do not require users to verify their identity. Or perhaps they have very high thresholds before KYC kicks in. They offer a much higher degree of anonymity compared to regulated platforms. And this anonymity is, unfortunately, highly attractive for individuals or groups engaged in illicit activities, like the North Korean hackers in this case. By converting the stolen funds into a widely accepted and relatively liquid cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, and then moving them through these non-KYC platforms, maybe smaller, less regulated exchanges or peer-to-peer services, they were able to further anonymize the funds. This makes it incredibly difficult for law enforcement agencies around the world who might be cooperating on the investigation to pinpoint the ultimate recipients or trace the money back definitively to the original $1.5 billion theft. It really is, as the source puts it, a sophisticated digital smoke and mirrors at global scale, meticulously designed to ensure the funds disappear without a clear, traceable link into the legitimate global financial ecosystem.
So they're using every advanced tool in the digital playbook mixers, cross-chain jumps, anonymous exchanges, all deployed with incredible speed and coordination to make this massive sum of money utterly untraceable. And this brings us to a crucial and frankly pretty chilling question. Why? Why go through all this incredible trouble? Why orchestrate such a massive, high-stakes, complex operation? What's the ultimate motivation here? So yeah, they've pulled off this truly astonishing digital heist, made $1.5 billion vanish into the digital ether through this labyrinth of sophisticated laundering techniques. But this brings us to the core of why this story is so much more significant than just, a massive theft, however big. If you were sitting there thinking this was about some sophisticated criminal gang funding a life of luxury, buying yachts and mansions, or just pure simple greed, well, prepare for a stark realization. This is about something far more impactful, far more concerning on a global scale.
Yeah, this really forces us to redefine what we even consider criminality in the digital age, doesn't it? What's absolutely critical to understand here, according to U.S. intelligence assessments and reports from bodies like the UN panel of experts, is that the primary beneficiary, the ultimate driver behind these massive crypto thefts, isn't typical organized crime. It's the North Korean state itself, the regime. They are believed to be directly funding their nuclear weapons programs and their ballistic missile programs through these cyber operations. So this isn't just about accumulating illicit wealth for personal gain. It's about national security objectives, building military capabilities, and posing a direct challenge to international stability and non-proliferation efforts. The money isn't buying supercars. Intelligence suggests it's buying components for weapons of mass destruction.
And when we connect that to the bigger picture, it totally explains why cryptocurrency has become such a vital tool for them, doesn't it? This is a direct and apparently incredibly effective method for sanctions evasion. What does that really mean in the context of a country like North Korea, which is under heavy sanctions?
Precisely. Traditional financial sanctions, the kind imposed by international bodies like the UN Security Council, or by individual countries and blocs like the US or the EU. They're designed specifically to cripple a nation's ability to finance illicit activities, particularly weapons programs, by cutting off its access to the global financial system. Banks worldwide are required to monitor transactions, screen customers, report suspicious activity, and freeze assets belonging to sanctioned entities. It's a powerful tool, historically, to pressure regimes. However, cryptocurrency operates largely outside of these traditional, heavily regulated banking rails. It's decentralized, it can be peer-to-peer, and transactions can be conducted globally with a degree of anonymity and speed that traditional banking simply doesn't and often can't offer. So by conducting these massive digital heists and then laundering the stolen funds through the sophisticated crypto methods we just discussed, mixers, bridges, non-KYC platforms, North Korea is effectively creating a vital economic lifeline for itself. They are generating hard currency, or its digital equivalent, that is extremely difficult for international authorities to track, to seize, or to control. And they're using this lifeline to directly fund their most sensitive and internationally condemned programs, like nuclear weapons development. It effectively renders many traditional financial blockades much less effective against them, especially if they can successfully launder the proceeds.
And the sheer scale of the state-sponsored theft is it's truly staggering. The $1.5 billion from this single Bybit incident, while enormous in itself, is apparently just one piece of a much larger, more troubling puzzle. Our sources highlight, and UN reports confirm, that North Korea has stolen well over $3 billion since just 2023 through these kinds of cyber operations. That's a truly mind-boggling amount of money to be generated purely through digital means, especially for a nation that is otherwise so heavily sanctioned and largely isolated from the formal global economy. It's almost unimaginable.
It really signifies a fundamental and frankly alarming shift in how rogue states or heavily sanctioned regimes can finance their strategic ambitions in the 21st century. In an era where traditional financial channels are increasingly locked down and monitored, sophisticated cyber capabilities become a new form of national wealth generation, a state-sponsored revenue stream. This isn't just a side hustle for them anymore. Evidence suggests it's a core component of their national economic and military strategy. It's a virtual cash cow that enables their most dangerous pursuits. It really underscores the point made in the source material. This heist wasn't greed, it was geopolitical strategy. It's a method of survival for the regime, it's a way to project power or defiance on the global stage despite sanctions, and it's a direct challenge to international efforts aimed at curbing their nuclear proliferation. It fundamentally redefines how we need to think about state-sponsored crime, cybersecurity, and their profound impact on global stability. This is no longer just a financial crime problem. It's a full-blown national security nightmare playing out in the digital realm.
Yeah, it truly changes the game entirely. When you realize that the funds stolen in a digital wallet hack may be facilitated initially by someone clicking on an innocent-looking link, that those funds could literally end up building ballistic missiles or enriching uranium for a nuclear program thousands of miles away, the stakes just go through the roof. This isn't just a problem for crypto exchanges or cybersecurity firms anymore. It's a global security issue that affects all of us, perhaps in ways we don't immediately grasp. And that leads us perfectly into what we can all learn from this audacious attack. What are the takeaways? And how can we better fortify our own digital defenses, whether you're a multi-billion-dollar exchange like Bybit or just an individual using a simple payment app on your phone? This whole incident, as devastating as it obviously was for Bybit and the wider crypto community, it also serves as a profoundly important, if painful, case study for all of us. It's like a digital stress test conducted on a global scale, revealing critical vulnerabilities that were perhaps overlooked or maybe underestimated in our increasingly interconnected digital world. So what did we learn? What are the key takeaways? One of the most glaring seems to be that even supply chains can be weak links. Now, in the digital realm, what exactly do we mean by supply chains? It's not trucks and factories, right? And why is their weakness such a pervasive threat today?
That's a crucial starting point, definitely. When we talk about digital systems, yeah, supply chains aren't about physical goods moving from a factory to a store or the physical components that make up your smartphone. Those have their own security issues, too. In the digital context, the supply chain refers to the interconnected network of software components, third-party libraries, open-source code packages, cloud service providers like AWS, and even the developer tools that modern applications and systems rely on. Think about it. A major software company, even a huge one, rarely builds every single piece of its code entirely from scratch anymore. It's just not efficient. They often use pre-built components for common functions. They utilize frameworks developed by others in the open source community, or they host their services on massive cloud infrastructures like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud. A vulnerability in any one of these external or third-party components may be a flaw hidden deep within a piece of code from an obscure, little-used library, or even a seemingly innocent developer tool, as was the case with that initial poison download here. That vulnerability can create a backdoor.
Or it can introduce a critical flaw that compromises the entire system that relies on it, even if the main system's code is otherwise secure. So the old saying holds true: a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And in the digital world, that weak link can often be found buried deep within your software supply chain, sometimes far removed from your direct oversight or immediate control.
That's a really powerful insight. It means you could have the strongest fortress walls imaginable, the most secure internal systems, the best guards. But if a contractor you hire brings in a compromised brick, or you use a tool provided by someone else that has a hidden flaw, the whole structure is suddenly at risk. Okay, another critical lesson highlighted by this attack, especially thinking about that delegate circle exploit we discussed, is the peril of blind signing. The source material says approving transactions without seeing full details is extremely dangerous. What is blind signing exactly in a digital context? And why is it such a significant and maybe pervasive security flaw that can even trip up seasoned professionals?
This touches on an extremely important issue: user transparency and control. And it's something that affects not just large institutions managing billions, but potentially individuals interacting with crypto or even other complex digital systems every single day. Blind signing occurs when you digitally authorize or approve a transaction, or maybe a smart contract interaction, without having full transparency or explicit confirmation of the underlying details of what you are actually signing off on at the code level. Imagine you're signing a complex paper contract, but maybe the crucial appendices are missing, or the ink used for key clauses is somehow invisible, and you're just told by someone, "Oh, don't worry about the details, it's fine, it's just a standard agreement, just sign here." You wouldn't do that, right? Or perhaps you're presented with a screen that gives you a high-level summary of the contract, maybe simplifies it, but the actual binding legal text is hidden away or difficult to access and parse. In the crypto world, this can happen when a user, or as in Bybit's case, an employee following procedures, approves a transaction based on what they see on their screen. The screen appears to show one thing, like send X amount of crypto to legitimate address Y. Everything looks correct. But because of malicious code operating in the background, like that compromised JavaScript, the underlying smart contract or system logic is actually configured to do something else entirely behind the scenes. As we saw with the delegate call exploit, the malicious code quietly altered the actual destination address, while the display shown to the employee remained unchanged and looked normal. So without the ability to truly verify the exact parameters, the precise instructions of what is being executed at the code level, line by line, you were essentially blindly signing that transaction. You're trusting the interface, not the underlying reality. This makes it a critical and unfortunately easily exploitable security flaw, because you are placing your trust in the display layer without being able to independently verify the fundamental action being authorized. It's a fundamental breakdown of the trust relationship between the user and the system they're interacting with.
That perfectly illustrates how absolutely critical transparency is. Not just for individuals managing their personal crypto, maybe a few $100s worth, but especially for the systems and the employees responsible for handling massive amounts of assets for others, billions in this case. So given these really profound vulnerabilities, from the supply chain weaknesses allowing the initial entry to the blind signing enabling the final exploit, what can companies and institutions actually do? How can they protect themselves against these kinds of sophisticated, multi-layered attacks? The source material points to some essential defensive measures.
Yeah, absolutely. And none of these are silver bullets, but they form layers of defense. One of the first, and perhaps most fundamental, is the absolute necessity of regular security audits. Think of these as frequent, thorough checkups of the entire digital system, conducted by independent, highly skilled security experts who specialize in finding flaws. Crucially, it's not a one-time thing you do when you launch. It needs to be an ongoing, cyclical process. These specialists meticulously examine all aspects of the system, from the core application code itself to the network configurations, the access control policies, operational procedures, everything specifically looking for vulnerabilities before attackers can find and exploit them. It's about proactively searching for those hidden flaws, the kind that enabled this Bybit attack, and then crucially addressing them before they can lead to catastrophic breaches. This often involves techniques like penetration testing or ethical hacking, where the security professionals deliberately try to break into the system themselves, mimicking attackers just to expose weaknesses.
Okay, so regular internal and external checkups, basically. And beyond those audits of your own systems, the source also stresses the importance of third-party vetting. How does that differ from a regular audit, and why is it so important, especially thinking back to what we discussed about those digital supply chains?
Third-party vetting is really about extending that same level of scrutiny outwards, beyond your own walls. It means bringing in independent experts or having rigorous internal processes to specifically review and confirm the security of any external components, services, or software that your own system relies on. Given that supply chain vulnerability we talked about, where the initial breach came through a downloaded tool, this is absolutely crucial. You can't just assume your vendors or partners are secure. If you're using a third-party payment processor, integrating with a cloud service provider like AWS, incorporating a piece of open-source code written by an external developer community, or even using a hardware component like a security module from an outside vendor. Third-party vetting aims to ensure that those components have been rigorously checked for security flaws before they get integrated into your critical systems. It's about extending your security perimeter beyond your immediate internal control and ensuring that everyone and everything in your digital supply chain meets stringent, verifiable security standards. It boils down to trust, but rigorously verify every single link in that chain because attackers will target the weakest one.
Trust but verify. Makes sense. And ultimately, the powerful metaphor used in the source material is that crypto companies, and maybe by extension, anyone handling sensitive digital assets, cannot rely on vaults alone. They require comprehensive digital armor. What does that digital armor really encompass? And what's the broader message there for anyone building or using digital systems today?
Yeah, I like that metaphor. It really encapsulates the necessary evolution of security thinking in the digital age. For a long time, the primary security idea, especially for valuable assets, was the vault, a strong, isolated, supposedly impenetrable storage solution, whether it was physical gold in a bank vault or digital cryptocurrency in a cold wallet. But this attack, and others like it, demonstrate that in our deeply interconnected digital world, relying solely on the strength of the vault itself is dangerously insufficient. Digital armor, on the other hand, signifies a much more multi-layered, holistic, and adaptive approach to security. It has to be dynamic. It's not just about where you store your assets, the vault. It's also critically about how those assets interact with other systems, how the underlying code managing them is written and reviewed, how employees access sensitive information in systems, how third-party components are safely integrated and updated, how quickly you can detect anomalies or potential threats, how effectively you can respond to incidents, and how often you review and update your defenses based on the changing threat landscape. So it means things like continuous monitoring for unusual activity, implementing robust access controls based on the principle of least privilege, meaning people only get the absolute minimum access they need to do their specific job, nothing more. It means embedding secure coding practices right from the very beginning of software development, not trying to bolt security on at the end. It means regular, effective employee training to recognize sophisticated social engineering tactics, like that initial poison download. It means having comprehensive, practiced incident response plans ready to go before an attack happens. And it means constantly adapting your defenses to new threat vectors as they emerge, because the attackers are always innovating. It's about building a comprehensive, defense-in-depth system that protects every conceivable entry point and interaction pathway, rather than just focusing all your efforts on securing a single repository or vault. It's fundamentally recognizing that the threat environment is constantly shifting and evolving, and therefore your defenses must be just as dynamic, just as interconnected, and just as vigilant.
Right. It's about recognizing that the battlefield is constantly shifting, the attackers are constantly adapting, and so your defenses need to be just as dynamic, interconnected, and vigilant, always learning, always improving. And this leads us, finally, to perhaps the most important question for many of our listeners today. Why should you care about any of this? Why does a multi-billion-dollar crypto heist, seemingly orchestrated by a rogue state halfway across the world, truly matter to someone who might not even own a single cryptocurrency or think they're involved in this world at all? Now, you might be listening to all this, hearing about these massive crypto heists, state-sponsored cyber warfare, delegate call exploits, all this complex stuff. And you might be wondering, okay, but I'm not into crypto. I don't have a digital wallet full of Bitcoin. I don't use these exchanges. Why should I care? And that's a completely fair and very common question. But the truth is, in our increasingly interconnected digital world, these kinds of incidents have a ripple effect. They touch everyone, often in ways you wouldn't immediately expect.
Yeah, if we connect this back to the bigger picture for everyone, The reality is that if you use any form of digital wallets or payment apps, and think broadly here, whether it's for your online shopping, your mobile banking app, using an app to pay for your coffee, tapping your phone at the grocery store, or even managing loyalty points for your favorite airline, you are in fact an integral part of this broader digital ecosystem. You're connected. The core technologies and security principles or lack thereof that underpin something like Bybit's cold wallets or the types of vulnerabilities found in their JavaScript files. They often share common architectural patterns. They might use the same underlying open source code libraries, or even rely on the same major cloud infrastructure providers like AWS as the everyday systems you interact with. So a weakness discovered and exploited in one part of this vast digital network, especially if it's in a critical component like a widely used cloud service or a common software library, that weakness can very quickly become a known vulnerability that affects another, seemingly unrelated part. It's like living in that digital city we talked about. A major fire in one high-rise building, even if it's miles from your apartment, can reveal fundamental flaws in the city's overall fire safety code, or maybe the water pressure, or the emergency response infrastructure, potentially impacting everyone's safety. The digital supply chain for your everyday banking app might rely on similar underlying components or face similar security practice challenges that were tested and exploited in a massive crypto heist like this one.
That's a really powerful analogy. It's not necessarily about direct exposure to cryptocurrency itself, but about the fundamental digital infrastructure, the plumbing and wiring of the internet that we all rely on every single day, from your smart thermostat at home to your online health records portal, maybe even the systems that manage traffic lights in your city. They all exist within this interconnected digital landscape. And there's another crucial point here. These cyber attackers, especially the sophisticated state-sponsored groups like the ones linked to North Korea, they don't just target the big fish like Bybit solely for the immediate money, although obviously $1.5 billion is a huge incentive.
That's absolutely right. And it raises an important point about the methodology and learning curve of these threat actors, both cybercriminals and nation-state groups. They often test on big targets, like Bybit, not just for the immediate financial windfall, though that's certainly a primary driver, but these large-scale attacks also serve as a crucial proving ground for them. They use these high-profile attacks to refine their techniques, to understand systemic vulnerabilities at scale, to develop entirely new exploits, and to see what works against well-resourced defenders. Once they've successfully developed and perfected these methods on a large, high-value target, they can then apply similar, or perhaps adapted and simplified versions of these very same attacks to hit smaller ones. And smaller ones can mean individual users like you and me, small businesses that don't have huge security budgets, nonprofit organizations, maybe even your local government services or school district. What works to steal billions from a major exchange can often be scaled down or repurposed to steal thousands from a small business, or even just to compromise sensitive personal data from individuals for later use. The sophisticated techniques and tools developed in these headline-grabbing large-scale attacks eventually trickle down. They become more accessible, maybe automated, and are often adopted or copied by less sophisticated criminal groups later on. So this means the digital weapons used against a Bybit today could, in theory, be refined and deployed against your personal accounts or your workplace systems tomorrow.
Which means that the lessons learned from this $1.5 billion heist aren't just for giant crypto companies or governments. They're really for anyone who interacts with the digital world, which, let's face it, in 2025 is virtually all of us in some capacity or another. And so the ultimate takeaway for you, our listener, is perhaps simpler than you might think. Awareness is your best defense. But what does that really mean in practice? Beyond just being told to be aware, how does that translate into action?
Awareness, in this context, it isn't just about understanding the intricate technical details of a delicate called exploit or how a cross-chain bridge works, although having some understanding certainly helps demystify things. It's more fundamentally about understanding the evolving threat landscape in general terms. Recognizing the common methods attackers use, social engineering, phishing, malicious downloads, and knowing and practicing the basic principles of digital hygiene and security. It means being consciously inquisitive, maybe a little skeptical about what you download and what you click on, especially if it seems too good to be true or arrives unexpectedly. It means paying attention to the permissions you grant to apps on your phone or software on your computer. Do they really need access to all that data? It means learning to recognize phishing attempts, those fake emails or messages designed to trick you into revealing sensitive information like passwords or account details. It also means perhaps demanding more transparency from the digital services you rely on, asking them, how do you protect my data? How do you verify transactions securely? What are your security protocols? Are you audited regularly? In an increasingly interconnected digital world where sophisticated attacks are becoming more common and their motivations more complex and geopolitical, an informed, vigilant, and maybe slightly questioning user base is an incredibly powerful first line of defense. Your individual understanding and your proactive choices don't just protect you, they contribute to creating a more resilient and secure digital environment for everyone.
So friends, what did you think of today's deep dive? This truly remarkable story of a $1.5 billion crypto heist, apparently orchestrated by North Korea to fund its nuclear ambitions. It paints a vivid and frankly pretty unsettling picture of our current digital landscape. Cryptocurrency is certainly an exciting and innovative technology. It's transforming finance, opening up new possibilities, there's no doubt about that. But as we've explored today, it has also undeniably become something else. A significant global battlefield, a new frontier in geopolitical conflict, and unfortunately, a new vector for state-sponsored aggression and illicit finance.
It really does redefine our traditional understanding of national security, doesn't it? It's clearly no longer just about physical borders, conventional armies, tanks, and planes, or even traditional economic sanctions alone. The digital realm, cyberspace, has become equally critical, if not sometimes more critical, in international relations and conflict. These incidents force us all, governments, companies, individuals, to consider the profound implications of state-sponsored cyber theft on global stability, on financial integrity, and indeed on our own individual digital safety and privacy. How do we, as a global community, effectively respond to threats that so seamlessly blend sophisticated crime, cutting-edge technology, and national strategic objectives? And maybe more importantly, how do we build digital systems, financial systems, communication systems, everything that are genuinely resilient against such sophisticated, well-resourced, and determined adversaries? It's a huge challenge.
That really raises a crucial question for all of us to think about as we wrap up. In a world where digital theft can directly fund geopolitical agendas, where a hack can potentially fuel a nuclear program, what new responsibilities do individuals, companies, and governments have to safeguard this shared digital frontier? How does this fundamentally redefine our understanding of national security in the digital age when a seemingly innocent click on a software link by one person could ultimately, even indirectly, contribute to a major international security threat thousands of miles away? It's definitely a lot to ponder. And it's a stark reminder, isn't it, of the profound and often invisible interconnectedness of our digital lives with the biggest global events shaping our world. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Stay curious, stay aware, practice good digital hygiene, and we'll see you next time with another fascinating exploration into the stories shaping our world.